All right, why is it that we only spot the signs of toxic people after we've been burned by them? Well, here's what I've learned about toxic people over the course of the last 30 years of being a pastor, having been burned by some toxic people myself, and having counseled hundreds of people who were burned by toxic people. It's not that they're so good at disguising the signs of their toxicity, it's that the signs are so subtle that they fly under most people's radar. It's actually very easy to spot a toxic person if you know what you're looking for. And so in this video, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach you the signs of a toxic person so that you can spot those signs before they inflict emotional damage on you, or your team, or the company that you lead, or the department you manage, or whatever group of people it is that you care about. When I first became a pastor, I was very naive about people. And unless a person came in wearing a costume with a big T that stood for toxic in the middle of it, I tended to just trust people. And you can imagine where that got me. I got burned very badly by some toxic people. And as I said, I've seen lots and lots of other people over the years and counseled lots of people who've been burned by toxic people. And what I noticed over the years is that toxic people tend to demonstrate certain patterns that unless you worked with as many people as I have over the years, which is probably somewhere around 10,000 by now, you just would never notice these patterns. Now, before I go any further, let me just say, this isn't about judging people, and it's not about labeling people. Everybody has issues. None of us are perfect. Lord knows I'm not. And in fact, many toxic people don't even know that they're toxic. They're just operating out of what they know to do. Nevertheless, the idea is to be able to spot the patterns before toxic people can wreak havoc on your life or the people that you care about. Okay, so what is the pattern? Well, I think if you watch most videos, they would say something like, watch how a person treats people in the service industry, like their waiter, or whether they badmouth their ex or their former boss. The problem with that is the real tells are way more subtle. So I'm going to give you 4 very subtle tells. The last one is the most subtle of all. But before I tell you what those are, if you would, in the comment section below, just list some of the things that you think are tells of toxic people and see if you can guess what is the most toxic and the most subtle of all. Okay, so we'll start with this one. A number of years ago, a guy comes into me for a counseling session that illustrates perfectly this first tell. And by the way, when I say on this channel that a guy came into me for counseling, or a woman, or a couple, just know this, I disguise their identity because I want to protect their confidentiality. So if I say it was a guy that came in, might or might not have been a guy. So this guy comes in to see me several years ago. The first time that he came in, he has a list of people that he wants to talk about who he feels like have mistreated him. You know, people like his boss or people that he worked with, some friends, which, okay, give him the benefit of the doubt. He's in a counseling session. He has some things that he wants to get off of his chest. Here's where it really gets interesting. The next session that he came in, he did the same thing, but it was with a different list of people. And the next session that he came in, he did the same thing again. You see, when somebody consistently presents themselves as the victim in every story that they tell, they're not just venting. That's a worldview. I call it the victim worldview. Everyone else is wrong. The universe is out to get me. God is out to get me. It's not me, it's you. And see, the thing that you have to understand is that this worldview will eventually include you. You will have been the most recent person in their minds to victimize them. So listen to what people are telling you, because healthy people can take responsibility for their part in things. I could have communicated better. I could have been more patient. I shouldn't have said that, you know, that kind of thing. Toxic people, they're never to blame. They're always the victim because they have a victim worldview. So that's the first sign. Okay, so here's the second. I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but you meet somebody and very early in the relationship, they begin to tell you how great you are and they build you up and they use all of these superlatives to describe you. And somewhere very early on, they tell you, you're my best friend. Or maybe if it's a romantic relationship, they say, I want to marry you. Well, this is called love bombing. And most people are familiar with the concept of love bombing in the context of romantic relationships or even cults. But love bombing happens outside of those contexts. The thing that's so dangerous about love bombing is that it can feel amazing at first, especially if you've been in a bad relationship or if you've been rejected a lot. Maybe you just were devastated in some kind of breakup. Who doesn't want to feel special? Who doesn't want to feel valued? You see, the problem with toxic people is that they want all of the benefits of a deep connection without having put the time into the relationship to build trust naturally. And the thing that you have to know is that toxic people tend to keep pushing and pushing and pushing on those boundaries until you say no, in which case you're the most recent person in their life that they're going to complain has victimized them. Now here's the third one, and this one's very subtle. I call this boundary creep. And this is probably the second most important sign to recognize early on, and I wish I would have known about this years ago. Toxic people don't all of a sudden just cross some major boundary in your life immediately. They'll ask a small favor that you don't mind fulfilling. Would you mind to get me a cup of coffee on the way in? You don't mind, you're glad to do that. You take the cup of coffee to them. You notice maybe that they didn't offer to pay, but that's okay. It's no big deal. But then they ask you for another favor, a little bigger, and then another one, and another one. And each one keeps getting bigger. What they're doing is that they're systematically testing your boundaries, and they're gathering data about what they can get away with. And one of two things will eventually happen. You'll become their personal assistant, or you'll start to set boundaries, which they will work even harder to dismantle. And if you're the kind of person who has a hard time saying no, they'll make you feel guilty for saying no to them. So that's boundary creep, systematically testing your boundaries until they figure out how much they can get away with. Now here's the fourth sign, and it's the most subtle of all of them, and it's the most telling of all of them. And the reason that it's so subtle is that it's so appealing. Toxic people are what I call certainty pushers. And what do I mean by a certainty pusher? Toxic people are highly skilled at portraying themselves as the voice of reason, with a black and white, right and wrong answer for most everything. The certainty pusher says, just follow this formula. Be like me, do what I tell you to do, and you'll be successful, happy, rich, whatever. The problem is that what they're doing is that they're turning their arbitrary opinions and preferences into absolutes for everyone and every situation. And the reason that that is so appealing and so devastating is that everyone wants life to be simple and to be predictable. When a toxic person takes you in and they portray themselves as the voice of reason, and then they love bomb you and they do all of the stuff that they do, it begins to feel like a privilege to be accepted by somebody who lives in such rare air. But once they gain your confidence, they'll take your confidence. They'll twist your shortcomings, your guilt, your inability to live up to whatever the black and white formula is that they have into a tool of control. That's really what toxic people are out for. They're not out for your well-being. They're out for control. Now here's the thing, none of those signs alone proves that someone is toxic. The real key is when you start seeing them cluster together in a pattern. Now what do you do if you recognize this pattern in someone? Well, remember, the goal isn't to wall yourself off from everyone, and it's not to live in fear. The goal is to be able to spot the pattern so that you can make conscious choices about who you allow into your life and how much access they have to you. Well, if you like this video, please check out this video. It's a fascinating study about social pressure, and I'll include the link in the description below. Hit the like button, and please subscribe so that you get notified every time a new video comes out. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Grace and peace to you.